Okay, so we like to discuss uh, a relation between the cost, volume, and profit. So why we like to discuss? Because it has been observed that there is a close relationship between these three variables, which is popularly known as CVP relationship. So before exploring this content in detail, let me ask you, or let me share some interesting things that why it is possible for Nilkhet shoppers to give a printout at 2 taka, and why it is not possible for other shoppers, say, who have their shop at farm gate, or who have their shops at Motizil, why they can't provide the same printout at 2 taka per page. What is the likely reason? Write your response in the chat box in short, and I will try to discuss on it. Due to massive production in Nilkhet and volume. Okay, so I have got my expected answer. So because of the mass volume of their services in the Nilkhet shops, so what can they do? They can make up their fixed cost by selling the, or by giving the service at a low price, and by increasing for its increased volume. But the same thing is not possible in other locations, what I mentioned or what you would think of. But they more or less, they have to incur some fixed cost, similar type of fixed cost. So to make up their fixed cost, they have to generate at least some contribution margin to make up their fixed cost. So some shops are generating their contribution margin by selling at a lower price, but selling at a high, selling the lower price product at a higher volume. But some shops are generating the same contribution by selling less volume at higher price. So we see that by changing the sales volume, we can make sure that we are covering our cost. And at the same time, I like to ask that you see that number of different types of chickens are available in kitchen market. So the kitchen, there are differences in type of chickens available in our kitchen market. So if I think of the chicken, which is more popularly known as chicken from Pakistan or cock chicken, so you see that the price changes over time, changes from 260 to 360 or 240 to 380. You see the changes of the per kilo price of the chicken in this direction. So when the profit goes up, when the price goes up, usually the response from the customer is that they are likely to buy less, or they are likely to consume less number of chickens. But what do you think? Why they change their price from time to time? Is it only for the changes in demand, or there are other reasons why the price move up or move down, go up or go down in some time and in different time? changes in purchase price. Good. Any other specific, more specific? I know that you have some specific answer. Changes in purchase price, it is from the retailer perspective, but if you look at from the manufacturer perspective, what manufacturer would mention? Yeah, supply shortage. But what is the root reason other than the changes in demand? Variable cost. Variable cost for what? Variable cost for variable cost per chicken for producing or for harvesting chicken. Yeah, you see the common complaint among the harvesters that the cost of feeds for the chicken go up always, or going up. So that is the reason why we change the price per chicken, and that is the common reason cited by the chicken manufacturers or chicken harvesters. Okay, so at the same time, you see that they are in pressure from the customers that they have to sell their chicken at lower price. So you see that your cost of harvesting is going up, the chicken, and again you are receiving pressure from your customer to sell the chicken at lower price. Who are you? You are manufacturer. Who are your customer? The wholesalers or the retailers are your customer, and you are in a pressure from both sides. Pressure for reducing price at which you are selling your chicken, and pressure for making up the cost, increasing cost in the feed market for the chicken. So you need to find out some way out to meet up these two pressures. So you will try to find out a volume level at which you can able to make up your variable cost, and also you can be able to make up your fixed cost, so that you will not be in a red zone to close out your business. And you see that it happens in some shops. If I'm in the chicken market, you see that over time chicken harvesters forced to close their businesses, and it happens. So what is the likely reason? The likely reason is that they couldn't afford to bear the pressure of rising cost and bear the pressure of reduced price at the market for the chicken. So then have to find out they have to find out the volume at which they need to sell at this amount of chicken at least to make up their cost, to make up their fixed cost more specifically, so that they will not run out of their business. So most often you see that it is not as easy as we are expecting. So they cannot take a precise decision, and they are forced to close their chicken business. Okay. And you see, are you familiar with Turkey? Are you familiar with Turkey? Have you seen the Turkey in the chicken market? Okay, Turkish chicken. Yeah, good. So you're familiar, but Have you observed the turkey chicken in recent days in the kitchen market, in recent year or in recent months? Have you seen it? That the kitchen retailers or wholesalers are selling turkey? No. Okay. What about others? Okay. Yeah, I'm getting good responses. The answer is no. Yeah, that is the reason what I was mentioning earlier, that the cost of harvesting turkey has gone up, and they need some foods, and which price has gone up, and the turkey producers couldn't afford to make up it, and turkey sales volume was not adequate enough to make up the fixed cost of harvesting turkey. So turkey became popular in the in last few years, but in recent year, the turkey producers have become forced to close their turkey manufacturing or turkey production because of the rising cost, and because of the declining price, and because of the lower volume demanded by the market. So you see that the case what we have discussed are indicating that there is a close relation between cost, volume, and profit, and one thing influences other things. Okay, so before proceeding, I have got an interesting fact that probably I'm getting no responses from females. You do not visit the kitchen market. I have some female participants in my class. You visit the kitchen market or no? You do not need your male members of the family go to the kitchen market, and you go to the shopping center. Does it happen? I was not getting responses for the chickens from the males. That's why I was asking this. Okay, probably you go to the super shops and you buy the frozen chickens. So you are not responding in that extent. So whatever you go or you do not go, please take news that what is going on in the kitchen market. And the kitchen market is our integral part of our life, and understanding managerial accounting will require a huge quantity of information from the market which are around us. It is not about the financial market. Okay, so the managerial accounting does not use the information from the financial market. Rather, it uses information from the grocery market or from the industrial market or from the kitchen market, or this kind of things. Okay, whatever. So we'll discuss about the relationship in more detail, but I believe that you have by this time acknowledged that there is a relation, and that is a significant relation between among the cost, volume, and profit. Okay, so if you explore the relationship, what will be your advantages? I mean, what purposes you can serve? You can serve a number of purposes, and if you understand the relationship between among these variables, and what are the variables in the cost, volume, and profit. If we look at the if we can recall the classification of cost based on the cost behavior, can you recall? Can you recall what are the classification of cost based on the cost behavior? Write your response in chat. We learned from the previous lecture that what are the cost classifications from the perspective of cost behavior. Write your responses quick so that we can proceed. Yeah, variable, fixed, mixed. Yeah, good. You have identified it precisely and briefly fixed and variable portion. Okay. Then VC, FC, atawar. Okay, so VC has become a popular word to indicate the venture capital. So I might misunderstand if I am not taking the managerial accounting course. I would understand the venture capital if I see the VC alone. Okay, whatever. Okay, what I was saying that what are the components in this analysis? So you see under the cost heading, there are two components. One is fixed cost. Let me follow the Atwar, the fixed cost and the variable cost. These are the cost component. And what are other component in the, we have the volume and we have the volume of activity. Okay. So by volume, we indicate the units of products we'll be selling, but when it is sales volume, we will express the volume in terms of dollar. So we have prices of products because for getting the profit, we need the price. So how many components we have got so far? One component is price. Another component is variable cost. Another component is fixed cost. And another component is volume, sales volume. And volume of activity precisely here. And what is the remaining? The remaining is the product mix or mix of products sold. So you know that companies no longer sell a single product. They sell multiple types of products. So all products they are selling are known as mix of products. So we need to look at this, each of these in detail to understand the relation between the cost, volume, and profit. So before proceeding, let me ask you, do you have any idea that what is the approximate number of products AMCL company, agricultural marketing company limited, Pran limited sells? The number of products they have in their product portfolio. Approximate answer from you. It can be 10 plus, 50 plus, 20 plus. Have you got my question? I believe you have got my question. I'm asking from you that what is the approximate number of products in the product portfolio of AMCL company, which is popularly known as Pran Limited or AMCL? Number of products in their product portfolio. 10 plus, Samira, sorry, Samia, 10 categories. Pran Limited, I mean the MCL, and I am other than the category, I'm just wanting to ask that how many products, how many, maybe around 20 or more, I'm just guessing. Okay, so you visit the Pran Pavilion in the trade fair, international trade fair, you visit the Pran Pavilion. And if you visit the Pran Pavilion, it is likely that you have seen that it is not 10, it is not 20. It is more than this number. How many products they have in their product portfolio? $500, thanks, and must be 100 plus. This is a safe answer from the Shadin, and it can be 10,000, and it will be covered in must be 100 plus. And if the real answer is 200, it will also be covered in 100 plus, around 200. Okay, so I have got some good responses. So I would request you to explore the annual reports or the website of AMCL and try to get the numbers. But so far, what I have got the information, I know you can verify it, that Pran has 2,000 plus products in their product portfolio. So you might get surprised that it is unbelievable. Yeah, it is unbelievable because they have a number of products which are not sold in domestic market. They sell those products only in the export market. So adding all of this, they have approximately 2,000 plus. So you can think of that how complicated their CBP analysis will be. The mix of products is very much diverse, and it is only for Pran, other than the companies in which it is doing a joint business like RFL, or they have a number of subsidiaries. Other than this, only Pran has 2,000 plus products. Okay, so it is a huge, and we have to learn more about this company, and they will be the leader of the next decade. Okay, next decades or several decades coming. Okay, so before proceeding the CBP analysis, let me share some assumptions which will be useful to understand the discussion going further. Okay, so first assumption we need to make that selling price is constant. We cannot change the selling price when we are making the analysis. Okay, analysis of what? Analysis of CVP. And we need to assume that costs are linear and can be accurately divided into VC and FC. That means the variable cost and the fixed cost can be clearly identified. And the costs are linear. I mentioned what is the linear relationship of the cost. So when you can express the relation between the cost and the volume with the help of a straight line, it is likely that it is not likely, it has a linear relationship. Okay. If you are analyzing a company which does a business of multi-products, in that case, the mix of products sold remains constant. What does it mean? Say Pran has 5 products for simplicity, and Pran juice has 20% share in their product mix in terms of their sales volume, and they have some other say food products which have this kind of percentage. So this kind of mix cannot be changed in the analysis. Okay, so these are the some assumptions we need to hold, but the caveat is that do not think that these are the limitations of CVP analysis. The dynamic relation between the CVP and nowadays we use the computer Excel program or a spreadsheet program to analyze the CVP. So it is possible to change this assumption and look at what are the responses of for changes of this assumption. So you can change this assumption, you can modify this assumption, and you can look at the responses, and you are not bound to, or these are not some restrictions given by the Bible. So you need to follow that these are the some common restriction or common assumption more precisely, and you can change it when it is essential, and you can look at how they are responding. Okay, so for, in this lecture we will be interested to cover at least 3 learning objectives. So our first learning objective is we'd like to see that how changes in sales volume affect contribution margin and the net operating income. This will be some recap of the lecture or the learnings what we understood from the previous classes. So we need a contribution income statement to see that what will be the changes in the profit in response to changes in selling price, in response to changes in cost, in response to changes in volume. So we have a standard contribution income statement of a racing bicycle company. So if it sells 500 bicycle, we see that their sales volume is $250,000. And if we subtract their variable expenses of 150,000, we see their contribution margin is this amount, and we see they incur this fixed cost, and they have this remaining net operating income 20,000. So the concept of contribution margin is as before what we learned from the previous lectures. It is the remaining or leftover amount after subtracting the variable expenses. So the purpose of CM or contribution margin is to identify that whether it is adequate to cover the fixed expenses or fixed cost. And if we see that the contribution margin exceeds the fixed cost, we will see that we will have positive net operating income, otherwise not. Okay, so it is possible. Here we have expressed this number in total, I mean for total 500 bicycle. So to make a analysis of CVP and expressing the relation of CVP, we can also use the unit basis sales price, unit basis variable expense to understand this relation. So what can we do? We can insert a new column on the right side, and we can see that what happens in per unit basis. So for 500 bicycle, we have 250,000 sales revenue. So what can we do? We can get the per unit selling price by dividing this number by 500. So we will see that the selling price per bicycle is $500. And if we divide the variable expenses by the number of bicycle, we see the number, we see the variable expense per bicycle is 300. So the remaining 200 indicates what? Remaining 200 indicates the contribution margin. But you see, this is not a contribution margin in total. Rather, this is a contribution margin in a per unit basis. So what does it mean precisely? It means that if we sell a single bicycle by using in this price, in this variable price, we will have 200 contribution margin per bicycle to cover the fixed expenses. So for each bicycle we are selling, we are getting 200 contribution, a $200 contribution to cover up the fixed cost expenses or fixed cost or fixed expenses. Now, what is my fixed expenses? The fixed expenses of the racing bicycle company is 80,000. The fixed expenses of the racing bicycle is 80,000. Now, if the racing bicycle company generates the contribution margin of 80,000 taka, say 80,000 taka, not the 100,000. In that case, what will be the net operating income? The net operating income will become 0. Is this point known as break-even point? This point is known as break-even point, and we will see that in that case, the total contribution margin will be equal to the total fixed expenses. Okay, so now we like to see what should be the number of bicycles to be sold to reach the break-even point. So instead of 500 bicycle, if we change this number for 400 bicycle, remember per unit selling price is 500. So if we divide this number by 400 bicycle, we get the $200,000 sales volume. And we have these variable expenses, 120,000 for 400 bicycles. And we have the remaining contribution margin of 80,000. We see the contribution margin now equals to the fixed expenses. So what is remaining? The remaining is nothing. The remaining is 0. So because our contribution margin has been eaten up by the fixed expenses we have incurred. Now, if you sell one more unit from the break-even point, your break-even point is 400 unit of bicycle, but if you sell additional 1 unit, is it very straightforward to think that each additional sales of bicycle will give me 200 net operating income? It will give me 200 net operating income. Now, if we sell 2 more units over the break-even point, in that case, I will have net operating income of how much? 200 or 400? I will have net operating income of how much? I will have net operating income of 400. Okay. So it happens in this way. And if we see that it is not necessary that you prepare a separate income statement and you want to see what happens if you sell 430 units bicycle. You do not need this kind of detailed calculation. When you have this standard numbers before you, what can you do? You can take the additional units you are selling over the break-even unit, that is the 30 units of bicycle, and multiply this by 200, which is the net operating income over the break-even point. At the break, I mean, when we are selling one more unit over the break-even point, we see that is 200. So if we multiply these two numbers, we get what will be the net operating income for selling 30 units of bicycle. Okay. So this is a kind of manual approach, that what profit or what net operating income will be available for this. But we have people who do not like this kind of lengthier approach. They want to speak in the way the mathematician speaks in using the algebraic formation. So using the algebraic formation, we can also make a mathematical equation to understand what we just have done. Okay. So what can we do? We can express the relation what we discussed in an equation form. So what will be the equation? You see, we have the sales number in the first. We need to subtract the variable expenses, and from this we get what? We get the contribution margin, and from the contribution margin we need to subtract the fixed expenses. So from this we get the net operating income. So it is actually works in which way? This sales is equal to 401, or it can be 430. So if we multiply this by 500 per unit, and we get the total sales. Okay, it is moving automatically. For a single click, there is a problem in the transition. Okay, so it should be, if our sales unit is 401, we can 401 multiplied by, okay, it would be appropriate if we write the 500 selling price beginning here. And for 500, okay, what is our variable expense per unit? 300. So 300 variable expense per unit multiplied by 401. And what is our fixed expenses? 80,000. And we will get what is the profit available for 401 sales. Okay, so that number is 200. So this is in equation form. Now, if you want to identify that what are this number? This is Q, this is price. What is this? This is Q, and this is variable cost per unit, and 80,000 is fixed expenses. So this has been identified here, that how can you get this? Nothing new here. Okay, so you see it has been expressed in terms of unit. Okay, so when a company has only one product, we can use this simplest form. But we see companies selling unit product, single product is a very few number of companies. So we need to do this calculation more or number of times for the number of products. If we have 10 products, we need to do this calculation for 10 times. For each product, we need to do this calculation. Okay. So this is the way that how can we express the relation between CVP using the equation. So where are the costs reflected here? Remember the 5 components I mentioned earlier. This is the selling price, one component. Another component is profit. Another component is volume, that is here Q. Another component is variable cost. Another component is fixed expense. Another component I mentioned is the number of products in the product mix. So what I mentioned, that if you have 10 products, you have to do this calculation. I mean, this calculation, this part for 10 times. Okay. And you need to subtract the fixed expenses in a single number. Okay. So what can we do? We can express this in terms of per unit other than the total value. So the things are same, but we are expressing the contribution margin now, not in total, but in per unit basis. So if we have the selling price per unit 500, variable expense 250, in that case, we see the contribution margin. Okay, variable expense is not 250, variable expense is 300. In our case, we see the, if I'm not wrong, I need to check it. Yeah, 300 variable expense. So we see that 200 contribution margin per unit basis. So we are expressing this contribution margin in per unit basis. So these equations are the same equations, but we have derived the unit contribution margin from the basic long equation. So what we are doing, we are taking the Q separately from the P and V, and this is the price minus variable cost multiplied by the volume, and we need to subtract variable expenses from this together. And we see that unit selling price minus unit variable cost can also be mentioned as unit contribution margin. Okay. Now, you probably can recall that I was saying that over the 400 break-even point, if we have, if we sell 401 unit of bicycle, what would be our profit? So what can we do? Using the unit contribution margin, we can calculate this. How can we calculate this? What was our unit contribution margin? Our unit contribution margin was 200 taka, sorry, $200 unit contribution. So this is this amount. And if we multiply this 401 by our total sales number, and we subtract the 80,000, we will get the profit for selling 401 units of, or 401 units of bike. So that number is $200. So these are the same things, but we are expressing one in manual form and another one is equation form. Now we are looking at if we express the number in, I mean the unit contribution margin, what will happen? So what we have taken here? So we have taken here the contribution margin per unit directly. Okay. Now, what we will be doing now, you are not interested to the calculation, manual calculation like an accountant. You are, you do not like the maths because you hate the equation. Rather, you want to see some pictures. You want to see some graphs to understand the same thing. So what can you do? we can make a graph of the CVP relation, cost volume profit relation, and we can understand the same thing using the graph. So you see that these are some information what will be required for plotting the graph. You see, the understanding of these numbers is critical to draw a graph. You see, if the sales is zero, I mean the bicycle sale is zero unit, what will be the variable expense and what will be the sales value in dollar term? It will be zero. Okay, and there is nothing, and contribution margin will be nothing. But you see that we have to incur the fixed expenses we set up for manufacturing bicycle. So who are we? We are the racing bicycle company. So in that case, if we have to incur the fixed expenses, we will get a net operating loss. So this is a negative number for what? 0 unit sale. And if we increase the sales number from 0 to 200, we see that our sales price is sales value is 200 multiplied by 500. You probably can recall the per unit selling price. So what is the total sales value? 100,000. And total variable expenses can be get by multiplying 200 by $300 variable cost per bicycle. So we'll get 60,000. So we have remaining contribution margin of 40,000, but we see that this is insufficient to make up our fixed expenses. So our contribution margin is inadequate to make up the fixed expenses. So what will happen? We still incur the net operating loss of 40,000. Then if we have the 400 units of bicycle, we see that as we saw it earlier, that it will give us contribution margin, which will make up only our fixed expenses, will remain nothing left over for the profit or net operating income. And at the same time, it is not causing any loss also. And if we can increase our sales from break even by 50% growth, take 200 more, that means total 600,000, we get this amount. We see here it is possible to have the 40,000 net profit. And now, how can we start plotting a CVP graph? So in the vertical axis, we are expressing the dollars. Here dollars we are expressing, and in the horizontal axis we are expressing the number of units. Okay, so it is to be followed always. How will we determine the units of sales here? Are these here randomly? Okay, if you have to draw a CVP graph and no other information is given, in that case you can assume it randomly. But in the mathematical problems, the units of sales will be given to you, and using that information, you can plot the CVP graph if it is in one of the requirements. Okay. Then what we need to do, we have expressed the unit volume in the horizontal and the dollars in the vertical. Now, first thing first, we need fixed expenses. Of what amount of fixed expenses we had? Can you recall what was the fixed expenses? Would you write in the chat box? Fixed expenses was 80,000. Okay, so you are with me. So $80,000. $80,000. So for the $80,000, what can we do? We can find out an approximate value for 80,000 here. And we need to draw a horizontal line which is parallel to the units of volume axis. I mean the horizontal axis. So why it is to be parallel, given the changes in the units of sales? Why the fixed expenses line should be parallel? Why it is to be horizontal? Why it is not moving in linear fashion, or why it is not moving in other direction? What will be your answer? Why it is a parallel line, or why it is a horizontal line? Because up to a particular range, it would be a constant. Can you, okay, particular range, the term we have used the reference level. You probably can recall that we mentioned a reference level term to understand the fixed expenses. Within a reference level, the fixed expenses will remain fixed. Yeah. Okay, if it exceeds, I mean, the units of sales exceeds the reference level, fixed expenses will change. Okay, let's proceed. Now, for the 400 sales, how much we have the total expenses? For the 400 sales, we have 120,000 variable expenses, we have 80,000 fixed expenses. What is our total expenses? 200,000, right? Yeah, 200,000. So what can we do? We can find out a plot. Here it is. If we take a different mark, okay. You see, here it is. What is it? It indicates the relation between 400 units sold and the total expenses incurred for producing these 400 units of bicycle. So you mentioned that it is 200,000. That's why you see on the vertical axis, we are connecting this with the $200,000. Okay. So if we plot other relationship for 600 units, 200 units, and the 0 unit, we get this kind of dot, this kind of dot, or this kind of box, or this kind of mark, whatever you do. Okay. So now what is your next task? The next task is to draw a line which will connect all these dots, which will connect all this dot or data point, which indicates the relation between the total expenses and the units of sale. Okay. So we have started from here. Now the question is, what is the total expenses what is the total expenses if we have no production? Is it 0? It is 80,000. So you see that when we have no production, we are still incurring what expenses? We are still incurring 80,000 expenses. You see, this is a positive expenses, and this is $80,000. Okay, next. For sales volume of 400 units, if we have, okay, if we have 0 units of sale, what will be our sales revenue? If we have 0 units of sales, what will be our sales revenue? 0. And if we have 400 units of sale, we have sales revenue of 500 sales price per unit multiplied by 400 units, it would be 200,000. So we can find out two dots. One is here, 0 to 0, and you know that why it is 0. Why it is 0? Because at 0 unit sale, we have 0 sales value. And for 400 units, we have 200 sales value. Now, if we connect this dot and this dot by a single line, by this green line, according to this graph, we get this green straight line. Now, we see that total expense and the sales line are intersecting each other at this point. So this point is known as break-even point. So this is a basic understanding from you, from your microeconomics, if I'm not wrong. So you see that what is happening before reaching to the 400 units of break-even, we see that we are incurring loss. So we are incurring loss, and if we exceed the 400 units of break-even sales, we see that we look at the profit. Okay. Now the okay. Okay. Now, what is the profit level at 400 units of dollar? Sorry, 400 units of sales. At 400 units of sales, what is the profit level or profit value? Profit value is 0. Now, if we ask ourselves that what is the profit if we have 500 units of sales, just try to identify the number from the graph, not consider the numbers we get earlier. For the 500 units of sale, we can get the profit by subtracting the total expenses from the total sales revenue. We see that total sales revenue for 500 units is 250,000. And if we subtract the total expenses for 500 units, which is here approximately 230 or 230 plus, we would see the 15,000 or something would be profit. Okay, so you need to be precise if we have the numbers, and same thing we can do for the 600 units. We would get approximately 40,000 profit. Okay, now is it possible to draw a relation between the profit and the sales unit? It is possible. So if we draw a relation between the sales unit and the profit, we will get this kind of picture. So you see that when we have 600 units of sales, we will see that our profit is 40,000. And when our sales is equal to 400 units, we will see that our profit is 0. Okay, so but when our sales is 0, I mean 0 units, what would be our profit? Our profit will be negative 80,000. Yeah. So how we get the profit? By using the either total equation, or we can use the equation we have developed for. We can take the unit contribution margin, which is 500 minus 300 This is the unit contribution margin, and we can multiply this by say 400 units. And if we if we subtract 80,000 fixed expense, we get profit is equal to 0. So this equation is behind this straight line or the linear line. So we see that there is a linear relation between the number of bicycles sold and the profit, but it rarely happens, the linear relation between the number of units sold and the profit generation. Okay. The final learning objective for today's class is using the contribution margin to compute changes in contribution margin and the net operating income or profit for the reason of changes in the sales volume. So before looking at this learning objective, let me ask you a situation where take it a blank slide. Think of public hospital, okay? So which receive a fixed budget from the government each year. And you see that the fees charged by the doctors from the patients there is less than the variable cost. In that case, would you expect what do you expect? Would you expect the same thing what you got earlier, that total revenue in this direction and the total expense in this direction? It is for the conventional case, total revenue and total expenses. It is the conventional case, but here let me write it dollar and let me write it the sales unit by sales. Okay, what do you expect? What will be the changes in this graph if there is an institution which is taking which is a kind of public institution which takes charges from the patient less price, which I mean their patient fee is less than the variable expenses incurred for each patient. So do you expect the same thing happens? What do you think? Do you expect that it will experience some financial difficulties after a certain point of time? The budget has expanded. You see, the budget provided by the government is fixed each year, and that can be adequate to cover the fixed expenses and also the shortage of variable expenses to some extent. But if it starts to, okay, I have lost my slide. Okay. So the case is, you will see that the patient, what will happen? That company, the public hospital, if they have no patient, you see they have no patient, what will be their revenue if they receive a fixed budget from government each year? They will have a positive revenue, or they will have a negative revenue, or they will have a, I mean, negative revenue or zero revenue if they receive a fixed budget from the government each year. Write positive or negative on the chat box. They'll have a positive revenue. So we can start in this way. Okay. So they will have a positive revenue. You have got the reason that why. So let me write it here. Why it is positive, you got the reason. But you will see with the budget they are getting from the government, they will be able to cover the makeup, they will be able to cover up the fixed expense and the portion of the shortage of variable expense to a specific volume of patient, for a specific volume of patient. But when it exceeds, you will see they are incurring financial difficulties in this region when their total expenses is greater than the total revenue. It is a real case for each of the government institution we have in our country. Okay, it happens. Their expenses is always greater than the total revenue they are generating combinedly from the government budget and also from the charges they charge from the service takers. Okay, but you see that as long as their revenue, which is they are receiving from the government, is greater than the expenses they are incurring for the service takers and also the fixed expenses, they have this positive gap, which is for profit, but it is not the usual case. This area is the usual case. Okay, they do not face this because their unit sales or number of people to whom they serve is greater in this region. Okay, so let's proceed. What we are saying that we'll see that how changes in contribution margin ratio, and we have a chat question. If a certain portion of budget is allocated for hospital and if there are no patients, shouldn't the total revenue graph be horizontal since the budget is fixed? Note that total revenue is a composition of two components here. One component is the budget they are receiving from the government. Another component is the revenue they generate from the fixed, they generate from their patients. Okay, so that's why the line is not a horizontal line. Okay, for having a higher number of patients, that will generate at least some extent of revenue. Famid, I believe you have got your response. You have got your answer. Okay. So I see our time is up. So we will look at our learning objective 3 in the next class.